was actually a curator of Chinese art, and as a result, we spent quite a lot of time in China. We had been there until the end of November last year, and we have lots of friends there. When the outbreak started in Wuhan, I think I first heard about it on the 20th of January, which was just before the Chinese Spring Festival or New Year. We were very concerned for our friends. We wrote them a kind of consoling message on the Chinese equivalent of Facebook and WhatsApp called WeChat, Wishing. And basically, they were very excited to get some news from out of the world. So I then decided that maybe I should use my skills with numbers to look at the numbers. I first compared, and this is probably 25th or 26th of January. By that time, we had about, I would guess, a few thousand cases already, maybe 100 or so deaths. And decided initially just to compare coronavirus to SARS, which we were already scared about. And it was clear that coronavirus was growing much, much faster than. The very first thing I noticed, even before I started looking at the numbers, China actually had two separate outbreaks. In those days, we looked at the numbers from Chinese websites. I can't read Chinese, but the numbers are fine. And what we saw is that the outbreak in Hubei province had a much, much higher death rate than the outbreak everywhere else in China, by about a factor of 15. So that was scary. Most of our friends were not in Hubei, they were in Shanghai and Beijing and so on. So the first thing I pointed out is that the death rate in Hubei was about 4 or 5%, whereas outside Hubei it was 1/10 or even 1/15 of that. Then I started to get more into the numbers, and on the 2nd of February, I had been playing with Excel and looked at the numbers and saw that the rate of increase of deaths was slowing down. This is a very easy thing to do. If you take the number of deaths today, the total number, that's basically a 25% increase between 80 and 100. But if the day afterwards, the increase is no longer 25%, it's say 22%, and the day after it's 18%, you start to feel there's breaks have gone on, because for exponential growth, the number should be the same every day. It should be 15%, 15%, 15%, or whatever number it's growing at. So the slowdown of the ratio of today divided by yesterday, either for cases or for deaths, indicates slowing. On the 2nd of February, I noticed that there were 4 days in a row where there'd been a steady linear decrease in the ratio of yesterday, and basically wrote a WeChat message, like my wife had done to the same people, our friends, saying that things looked like they were slowing down. We then got on a plane and flew from Israel to New York City. And when I landed, there were all these emails from me saying, "Are you the Michael Levitt who posted this message in Chinese saying that everything is slowing down?" And what had happened is that somebody, I don't even know whom, had taken the 2 pages of PDF that I'd sent them, had it translated it to Chinese and actually posted it on the Facebook equivalent or the Twitter equivalent in China in Wishing, and there were already 2 million views of it.
So you then started paying attention every single day thereafter?
So each day, the total number of cases is always increasing, but the number of new cases increases and then gets to a maximum.
Come fare network marketing? Questa è la prima domanda che sorge alle persone che iniziano questo.
For an epidemic, it gets to a maximum and then decreases at the same rate. Now, the epidemics, both in China in Hubei and China outside Hubei, and I kept on looking at them separately, both behaved very well. They basically got to their maximum, started slowing down. So it was relatively easy, maybe by the 15th of February, to predict the total death counts for the epidemic inside Hubei, as well as the death epidemic outside Hubei. It was about 3,000 inside Hubei and about 120 outside Hubei. So that was basically how things were.
So you noticed that the curve was less of a sort of exponential curve than we might have feared in those early days.
In some ways, there was never any exponential growth. From the minute I looked at it, There were never any 2 days that had exactly the same growth rate, and they were getting slower. Of course, you could have non-exponential growth where every single day they're getting more than exponential, but the growth was always sub-exponential. So that's the first thing.
So because we talk, at least over here, we talk endlessly about the R rate, the reproduction rate. And apparently that began very high, maybe as high as 3, and now is down. We've got it down below 1 in the UK. Intuitively, if there's a high reproduction rate, you should see that exponential curve just going up and up.
No, wait. Okay, so let's just see this. The R0, which is very popular, is in some ways I think a faulted number. Let me explain why. The rate of growth doesn't depend on R0. It depends on R0 and the time you're infectious. So if you have twice as long infectious and half the R0, you'll get exactly the same growth rate. And this is sort of intuitive, but it's not explained, and therefore it seems to me that I would say at the present time, I think R0 became so important. A lot of movies that were very popular talked about R0. Epidemiologists talk about R0, but looking at all the mathematics, you have to specify the time infectious at the same time to have any meaning. And the other problem is that R0 decreases. We don't know why R0 decreases. It could be social distancing. It could be prior immunity. It could be hidden cases.
You've been observing the shapes of these curves and how the R number tends to come down and the curve tends to flatten in some kind of natural way, regardless of intervention. Is that what you are observing?
We don't know. I think the big test is going to be Sweden. Sweden is practicing a level of social distancing that is keeping children in schools, keeping people at work. They are obviously having more deaths than countries like Israel or Austria that are practicing very, very strict social distancing. But I think it is not a crazy policy. The reason I felt that social distancing was unimportant is that I had the 2 examples in China to start with, and then we had the additional examples. The first one was Korea, Iran, and Italy. The beginning of all the epidemics showed us slowing down, and it was very hard for me to believe that those 3 countries could practice social distancing as well as China. China was amazing, especially outside Hubei, in that they had no additional outbreaks. People left Hubei, were very carefully tracked, had to wear face masks all the time, had to take their temperatures all the time, and there was no further outbreaks. So this did not happen either in South Korea or in Italy or in Iran. Now, 2 months later, something else suggests that social distancing might not be important, and that is that the total number of deaths we're seeing in New York City, in parts of England, in parts of France, in northern Italy, all seem to stop at about the same fraction of the population. So are they all practicing equally good social distancing? I don't think so. The problem, I think, is outbreaks occurring in different regions. So I think social distancing that stops people moving from London to Manchester is probably a really good idea. My feeling is that in London and in New York City, all the people who got infected all got infected before anybody noticed. There's no way that the infection grew so quickly in New York City without the infection spreading very quickly. So one of the key things is to stop people know that they're sick, infecting others. And here again, China has 3 very, very important advantages that are not high-tech, that don't involve security tracking of telephones. What they involve is, number 1, the tradition in China for years of wearing a face mask when you're sick. As soon as the coronavirus started, everybody wore a face mask. It doesn't have to be a hygienic face mask. It just has to be face covering that stops you spraying saliva micro droplets of saliva on somebody you talk to. The second thing in China is that because of the SARS epidemic, they were so scared of it. In most airports, stations where you pay tolls, etc., there are thermometers, infrared thermometers that measure your temperature. So having your temperature measured at every single store entrance, either with a handheld thermometer or with something mounted on the wall, is something completely standard in China. And the third thing is that almost all payments in China are made not using a credit card. So in some senses, it is very, very much easier there to practice the social distancing. Of course, in addition, they know where people are.
What's your view of the lockdown policy that so many European countries and states in America have introduced?
I think it is a huge mistake. I think we need smart lockdown. If we were to do this again, we would probably insist on face masks, hand sanitizers, and some kind of payment that did not involve touching right from the very beginning. This would slow down new outbreaks. I think for example, they found, as I understand, that children, even if they're infected, never infect adults. So why do we not have children at school? Why do we not have people working? England, France, Italy, Sweden, Belgium, Holland are all reaching levels of saturation that are going to be very, very close to herd immunity. So basically, I think that's a good thing. I think the policy of herd immunity is the right policy. I think Britain was on exactly the right track before they were fed wrong numbers, and they made a huge mistake. I see the standout winners as Germany and Sweden. They didn't practice too much lockdown. They got enough people sick to get some herd immunity. The standout losers are countries like Austria, Australia, Israel, that actually had very, very strict lockdown, but didn't have many cases. So they have damaged their economies, caused massive social damage, damaged the educational year of their children, but not obtained any herd immunity. I think in many ways, the European countries are fine. They didn't need to have the lockdown, but they will have all reached a high enough level of infection not to have to worry about further future attacks of coronavirus. The United States seems to be heading that way. They're certainly that way in New York City, but they still have a long way to go.
What you're saying is that you believe success, as we are currently measuring it, which is as few cases as possible and as small a spread of the virus as possible, is actually failure.
I think if you really control your epidemic, for example, California has now had lockdown for 6 weeks and once another 4 weeks. They have so far less than 100 deaths. That means they don't have more, let's say, 100,000 in people. That is not enough to give them significant herd immunity. They didn't need to do all that lockdown. The lockdown, I think, is particularly hurtful in countries that don't have good social infrastructure. Countries like the United States and Israel, many people have been really, really hurt, especially young people. I think that everybody panicked. They were fed incorrect numbers by epidemiologists. And, this, I think, led to a situation. There's no doubt in my mind that when we come to look back on this, the damage done by lockdown will exceed any saving of lives by a huge factor. One very easy way to see this is that, and again, I'm getting into sensitive territory here, but economists have a very simple way of looking at death. They don't count people. They come to the conclusion that if you're 20 and you die, that's a greater loss than if you're 85 and you die. And it's a hard issue, but in some ways, are we valuing the potential of future life of the 20-year-old? Are we valuing the loss of a more senior person? Now, by what's called DALY, disability adjusted life years, where basically if somebody is in their 80s, has Alzheimer's disease, and then dies from pneumonia, perhaps due to corona, that is less of a loss than if a 15-year-old is riding his motorcycle, his bike, and gets run over. So this is an important way of looking at the death. It's also, right now we know that the number of excess deaths in Europe is around 130,000 up till yesterday. This is for all of Europe. This is for a population of around 330 million people. So in excess of 100,000 for this whole year is actually not that much. In some of the worst flu epidemics, we get to those kinds of numbers, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. Now, I'm not saying flu is like coronavirus. I'm just simply saying that the burden of death of flu is like coronavirus, especially when we correct for the fact that people who die from coronavirus are older on average than people who die from flu. Flu kills young people. It kills 2 or 3 times more people under 65 than does coronavirus. If we put those facts into the situation, we find that the burden of death from coronavirus, I'm fairly sure, will in Europe, where we have good numbers, be less than that of a very, very flu. Another factor which has not been considered are all the cancer patients who aren't being treated, are all the heart cardiology patients who aren't being treated. I've heard estimates of tens of thousands of people who are basically going to be dying because of lack of that treatment. And generally, again, the age group who die of cancer are younger than the age group who died of coronavirus. There's one very easy way to sort of summarize coronavirus. I put an article in the Medium in response to an article by the pretty famous British statistician Sir David Spiegelhalter, Cambridge, and he had said that the numbers coming from Ferguson suggested that we had to lose about 1 year of people. It turns out, in fact, that I immediately wrote an article in the same Medium in reply to him, saying that, in fact, the answer was actually 1 month, not 1 year. So basically, my feeling is, and it's been supported by the numbers, that the amount of excess death you need to reach saturation, I'm not going to call it herd immunity, where the virus by itself stops, is on the order of 4 weeks of excess death. Now, to give you some idea, in the European area, where there is good monitoring by a website called Euromomo, which is run out of Denmark, it covers about 300 million people. Every week in Europe, in that area, there's around 50,000 natural deaths. So 4 weeks would be about 200,000 extra deaths in that year. And it looks like coronavirus in Europe, where it's no doubt that it's the most severely hit area in all the world, will probably reach around 200,000 or 4 weeks worth.
So what happens